So, Matty boy, what podcast number are we up to now?
We are up to 12.
12. Wow. Wow. Okay. And relaxation strategies, right? We've just
Yes.
come from sleep, which I guess has started to kind of look at the area of, the things we need to do to get the system recharging properly. But I guess without a relaxation strategies, then all this is really not going to work. So I'm curious to know how can we frame this? I guess so. Question number one is, why is this important?
Well, just imagine, Tim, that you've been working intensively on something like a lot of professionals will be doing, and you come to the end of the day and you just feel absolutely wired, and you need to unwind. We talk about bringing the revs per minute, the RPMs down, using this kind of car engine metaphor. But just because you've stopped work, your system is still kind of wired. Thoughts are, and impulses are just firing in your mind like bullets out of a gun. You just feel tense and alert. And that all makes it very hard to relax and switch off. That's the problem that we're talking about here.
Yeah, no way. A subject close to my heart on this one. We could do this podcast for hours. I don't know how we pack in. We try and pack in so much, like about around 15 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to assume you've done some research, or is that a dangerous thing to assume you've done some research on this one?
Well, let me tell you how it affects people.
Okay, fine, yeah.
Including me, and I've got some personal examples. I mean, you mentioned in your intro that this is all linked. And I would argue that in that state, you can be kind of exhausted and know you need to sleep, but trying to sleep when you're pumped and in that way it's pretty much doomed to failure. But I'll give you a personal example. When I used to fly and travel a lot, I would often land into London Heathrow or whatever at 11, 12 o'clock at night. I'd then have a 2.5 hour journey driving home, which I would struggle to stay awake during, but needed to be in that concentrated, focused state. And then I would get to bed and I would struggle to sleep deeply and would wake up feeling pretty rough and not refreshed or recharged. Even though on the journey driving home, I just felt absolutely exhausted, and like if I let it go, I would fall asleep at the wheel. So,
it's just so interesting how the system works, isn't it?
It's amazing, isn't it? What we also know as well, and I've been given this feedback, in that state of wiredness, when you transition into the family space or the social space at home, that level of pumpedness really affects your ability to connect with your loved ones.
Yeah, totally.
And I've been told by my wife on numerous occasions, look, just go for a walk, wind down a bit. I don't want you here in this state.
Yeah. Because
it's not a pleasant kind of energy to be around, that kind of snappy, alert, focused kind of energy. What we also know as well is it affects our ability to find off, which I know you're going to be talking about in our next podcast, and just that sense of rejuvenating. I was working with the chief exec of a business, and he was describing to me how he copes with this problem and how unhealthy it was. He said, I finish work, I can't unwind. He said, I have between 1 and 2 bottles of wine every night. Oof. And that's the only way I can sleep.
Oof.
He said, but then the problem is I wake up and I need lots of really strong coffee to then get the system going again, because I've not had a properly rejuvenating sleep. And he said, I've been on this track for years. And he said, it's starting to affect his health. So this is a problem.
Oof. Gosh, 1 to 2 bottles a night would kill me. I mean, it's like, that's a lot.
Well, I think his system had got used to it. And of course, the problem with alcohol is when you...
I always wake up in the middle of the night. That's why I don't like drinking too much now. It's like...
Well, the research shows that whilst it might help you to get to sleep, you often don't hit that deep level of sleep that I know you talk about in the sleep podcast.
Yeah.
which is the deeply rejuvenating sleep. So, which is why you can often drink a lot, think like you slept well, but you still feel really rough.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, I can relate to all that stuff. I mean, when you and I were busy doing, major travel pre-COVID stuff and a little bit before then, that whole period. I mean, yeah, just the inability to come in and enter the family dynamic healthily was a real problem. And yeah, just I really struggle to switch off generally, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't think you're alone. I mean, I'm in the same
no. Well, especially now things are ramping up. I mean, what's the challenge now is the travel's coming back in again now, right? You and I are both starting to travel a bit more. I know we're being a bit mindful about how we do that, but certainly clients I'm working with, the demands now are coming back fierce on travel, right?
Yeah,
like fierce.
Yeah.
So this is something that really needs to be borne in mind about how we look after ourselves and relax. Okay. Okay. Where are we going next with this one then? Is it have you got
how to start to engage with and tackle the issue?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what's our thinking on that then? How are we going to tackle this?
So I've got 4 kind of tactics, if you like, that are tried and tested that can help with this. One, which we talk a lot about, is breathing in a controlled and deep way. And I know we've talked about it on other kind of podcasts and other sections of the book, but just to say a couple of things about it, if I can, Tim. I mean, this. So what we are talking about is very consciously slowing down your breathing and breathing more deeply than you would normally. And what that does from a physiological point of view is it slows your heart rate down. It stimulates the vagus nerve, which runs from your brain stem to your abdomen. It's part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the body's rest and digest activities, as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system, which regulates fight or flight. So it's kind of calming everything down, and you immediately, within minutes, start to feel calmer. And this tactic, we're both English. We know until recently the English soccer team had a problem, which was if in a tournament it went to penalties. In the previous 25 years, we'd lost every penalty shootout.
Yeah, I think Euro 96 was the last one we won, wasn't it? Against Spain.
Yes. So huge problem. Okay. Prior to the last World Cup, the England manager and his whole support team did a lot of work with this. If it happened, and it did, against Colombia in the knockout stages. And there's a fascinating article about how what tactics they use to overcome this huge weight of history and negative expectation. And part of it was getting them to practice in intense moments this exact deep breathing that we're talking about.
Wonderful.
And what's fascinating is I read a piece of analysis that was looking at how long the Colombian players took to walk to the spot and take a penalty versus the England players.
And how cool is that? I'm loving this. Go on.
Yeah. And the English players were taking double the length of time. And that apparently was all intentional, because during that time, what they were doing was exactly what we're describing here, which is calming down their nervous system, which, as you can imagine, was in hyperdrive.
Love that. It's such a fascinating microcosm, penalty taking in knockout competitions. Seeing how people prepare themselves. I'm going to be going forward now. I'm going to be looking at their relaxation strategy now to determine their success. And again, okay, this is good. Yeah, go on.
I tell you what, I was on a program with a guy that worked for the Canadian Special Forces, and he was saying that we train all our operatives in this deep breathing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, what? So these really tough guys that are often, involved in covert operations behind enemy lines? I said, yeah. I said, why? He said, because the research shows that people make far better decisions in intense pressured situations, if they can calm themselves down, broaden their field of vision, because often what happens when you're very stressed and pressured, your field of vision becomes very narrow. And he said, we've realized they make far higher quality decisions from that place of being centered and relaxed than being pumped.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm thinking about sort of the mediation that I used to do when we look at the traffic light system: green, yellow, red, and the ability to get to green is deep breathing, because that's where the wisdom is. So I love all that. I love all that. Yeah.
I mean, very simply, what we talk about is, and many of these techniques, what they talk about just very practically about how do you do this? You breathe in slowly and count to 5.
And so just for I'm assuming people watching the video, but if you're doing the audio, where are you breathing into? Because I know that's quite important, isn't it?
As deeply as possible. So right into the gut. So your stomach will kind of push out as your lungs fill up and your stomach moves accordingly.
Yeah. So deep into the belly chamber. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then you breathe out for up to a count of 8. Depending on how kind of relaxed and how pumped you are. The longer and slower you breathe out, the deeper the sense of slowing down your heart rate and your metabolism.
Yeah, and there's a biomechanics there, isn't it? Because you're actually exhaling, that's the right English word, isn't it? Exhaling more CO2. So in a way, that's kind of, the more CO2 you're getting out compared to the oxygen coming in, the deeper the relaxation goes as well.
Brilliant. And sometimes people ask, well, how long do I do this for? There's a piece of research that was published in Harvard, in fact, by one of our master's degree colleagues, Megan Wrights, and a colleague of hers, Michael Chaklerson. They have done a lot of work in this space, and they talk about, I mean, a quote from their research is, in our study, the leaders who practice for at least 10 minutes every day progress significantly more than others who did not. So there's something about practicing this, and I know we've talked about this in other podcasts, which seems to make the benefits more accessible.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a given now, isn't it? I mean, a few years ago, no, but I think people now, that the mindset is shifting so much on these types of approaches now that, at the heart, we all need to have a breathing strategy that calms us down. Otherwise, we're going to be revved, right? And pay the consequences of being highly revved a lot of the time.
Yeah. I tell you what's incredible. The US military now trains every single one of its operatives in these breathing techniques.
Yeah, I completely understand why as well. I mean, I'm a firm believer, unless you get the biomechanics right, the mental processes, are just not going to last that long, right?
Completely agree. In fact, here's a quote from a Harvard article called "Why Breathing is So Effective."
You got some hot stuff today, man. The quotes and citations you're firing.
Why breathing is so effective at reducing stress, and this is to your point, which is it's very difficult to talk your way out of strong emotions like stress, anxiety, or anger. Just think about how ineffective it is when a colleague tells you to calm down in moments of extreme stress. It doesn't work. You have to, as you're saying, connect into the biomedical system.
Biomechanical system.
Mechanical system, sorry.
I feel a little bit compelled to put my own kind of research into this. As when I lost my wife 4 years ago, just a little under 4 years ago, I, as you know, got my grief coach on board, who was all about the biomechanics of working through strong emotions, which, that's where a lot of our 90 seconds to get through strong emotion. And she said, unless you get the biomechanics of breathing right, you're not going to be able to allow these emotions to move. So we practice this time and time again with some really strong emotions coming up for me at that really challenging period. And she was right, it just moved through. And she said, it's the biomechanics, you've got to get the breathing right. And then the grief and the strong stuff will move through. So I'm completely converted on this. I just think it's absolutely vital.
Well, you're a living example of having done this, and it helped enormously. I've got 3 other options. I mean, breathing is the most powerful one. you're in that pump state, you're trying to come down, relax so that you can enjoy your evening and you've got a chance of sleeping. I'm not going to say much about these other ones because we talk about them in more detail elsewhere. Option 2, exercise. I mean, what we know is exercise, again, helps to kind of get some of that tension shifting in a way that, again, just talking doesn't. Option 3, journaling. So you're feeling pumped, you're wound up, you're about to enter the family space. I mean, debriefing your day by actually writing some of the highlights, some of the lowlights, some of the frustrations. It's almost like it creates that flow of energy and kind of gets it out onto the page, and you can look at it a bit more objectively. And of course, if you do that with breathing deeply as well, then you're getting a real double bang.
I've got a question, and I've also maybe got an idea about how we answer it, but for me, this was a bit of a knife fight, if I'm being honest, right? I resisted all this stuff for years, and it was only when Tala passed away that I really started to do this seriously and get the benefit from it. Because I was coached in it, as I told you. So now, it's a habit of mine now, which I benefit from. How do you get those people who are maybe like me, who kind of are busy, how do you get them to be aware to go, oh, I need to breathe now, right? How do we help those people? Because, you need quite a high level of self-awareness to get that when you're charging around.
Oh, you do. And
by the way, I have a suggestion too. So I do have, but I want to hear from you. No,
give us the suggestion.
I'm putting you on the spot, fine. But if not, I have a suggestion.
I mean, for me, creating patterns, triggers, reminders is something that is extremely helpful. So you don't have to be thinking about it too much. Like I turn my computer off and I just reach for my journal. For instance, and it's just a habit that I create for myself.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, I very much, when I was trying to get better after my kind of meltdown, I was told to look at what triggers me and what's the behaviors that trigger me, so I could always predict that. And that's where the awareness of breathing started. And then, of course, I put it to the test with Tala's passing. I mean, for me, what I'm realizing is, we've talked about doing Monday morning meditations. I know we're going to be doing that shortly, but I think if people are curious about doing that, they should join us on that. On the Monday morning meditation, this is where we will be practicing this stuff. This is where you will be getting the habit over time, should you want to. So I think that's going to be a good natural next step for us.
It's far easier, isn't it? Doing it with others, I find.
Exactly. I think there's theory and then there's practice, and then I think that's free practice for everybody if they fancy it. So come along and join us. That's what I would say.
Tim, on the breathing thing, I don't know if you've seen it in Norway, but there's been a TV program running in the UK featuring a guy called Wim Hof.
The Hof technique. I haven't seen the program, but I do know a little bit about the guy. Because Rick, our beloved Rick, my business partner, for those of you who are listening, he loves the Hof technique. He's jumping regularly in and out of cold stuff.
The TV program is called Freeze the Fear, but at the heart of it is breathing. As a way of centering yourself, calming yourself down so you can do something that instinctively evokes a lot of fear and anxiety. And it's amazing on this TV program. It's on BBC iPlayer for those that have got access to it. How you see a number of well-known celebrities quite emotionally tackling some quite big issues. I mentioned 4 things, Tim. Option 1, breathing. Option 2, exercise. Option 3, journaling. There's a 4th one, which again, I'm not going to say much about because we've got a whole section of the book devoted to this, but do something absorbing that you enjoy.
Flow, isn't it? You're going to hear me say a little bit more about that next podcast. lovely cue up to where we're going. But I think this is excellent. I mean, what sort of final observations have you got, about this? Where are we left with this?
I think for me, there's a real paradox with these different 4 options. And the paradox is they're actually all quite easy to do. You don't need a lot of special equipment. You don't need a lot of special training. They're very easy to do. But actually doing them, doing what we know is good for us, is something that I oftentimes find challenging. Instinctively, I don't want to do it. And a lot of people I speak to say exactly the same thing. I know this is good for me, but I just don't do it. Which is where doing it with others can make it so much more accessible.
I have this vision that in a few years' time, our Monday morning meditation is going to be quite busy with people wanting to practice. Let's see. Let's hope the community grows that way. That'd be great. Yeah. But so I agree completely. I mean, I'm pleased to say for me, it's a practice now. I devote time to, but it was a knife fight for a while. All right, my friend. Listen, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that one. And yeah, we're looking at finding off next, building on this.
Fabulous. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.